Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Radleigh Valentine show. I am your host, Brad Pitt. No, Radleigh Valentine, still Radleigh Valentine. So, welcome. Happy New Year. We are in the month of January, which is super cool. Um, Today, we are going to be going further in my new series that I am calling The Next Wave. This is people who are doing something that I think is unique or different or special or interesting, that I feel like is vibrant, that I feel like is alive, and that I feel like is something that you guys should be hearing about. So if you're watching this on YouTube, then hey, and there are other ways that you might be watching it. Or if you're listening on Mind, Body, Spirit, then just give a listen, sit back and relax. So our two guests today have very interesting stories. This is the space where religion and spirituality intersect. Now, I was thinking just earlier today that there's sort of an analogy in my life for this. If you think about religion, you can almost think about religion being like a tarot card. It's a fixed system. It tends to have certain rules and it tends to have certain belief systems, and they kind of don't like you to waver that much from that. Whereas spirituality can be more like an oracle card deck. It's a free for all. Whatever you like, whatever you're interested in, there it is, all ready to go. So today we're going to look at how these two things intersect. And our two guests are Jim Bridgham and Jeanne Mitchell. These are both ordained ministers, and I'm going to let them tell you about themselves. So we're going to go ahead and bring in Jim and Jeanne. Hi, guys.
Ooh,
So let's do ladies first. Jeanne, tell them about yourself. Tell them who you are.
I'm Jeanne Mitchell. I'm a retired lactation consultant, and Radleigh honors me by saying I'm ordained. I'm not yet. I've been to
Okay.
seminary. I went through 3 years of seminary. I've just finished, and I still have a few steps to go, but the goal will be ordination into the priesthood, and it's the Anglican Church.
Awesome. And Jim?
Yep. So Jim Bridgham has been ordained for over 20 years, 22 years now, which is a little bit crazy. Also graduate. We shared a denomination for a long time. I've recently transitioned denominations, but I also served as a military chaplain. So although I had the Anglican background, I worked in what's called a pluralistic environment. So I worked with people of different faith groups, faith communities, and supported them all over the world.
Great, cool. So I'm just going to start with Jim. So you have an interesting history because you came from woo-woo land. You were
Oh, I did.
born, you did. Go ahead,
Yeah.
tell them about.
Yeah, so I was born in Woo, like the center of Woo land, at least in North America. So I was born in Salem, Massachusetts, the historical witch city, if you don't know. And if you haven't been there, you should go, especially on Halloween.
I
Make no
I
money
want
from
to
that.
go.
Oh, it's so
It's
awesome.
on my bucket list. It is on my bucket list. It
They shut
is.
down the whole city. So like you just walk around and there'll be A-list celebrities walking around and people will go up to them and say like, hey, try it harder next time. Like,
Oh,
they get close. So
oh
they're
my
saying
God.
people take it to the next level. And you don't have to believe me, go look it up. You'll see. Salem and was kind of raised Roman Catholic. So went to church, kind of viewed it as checking the box more than anything. And I still remember the day I took this world religions class. And in the class, at the end of it, I said, wait a minute, if all religions are the same, why should I have any form of morality? So I went from having a very strong moral compass to no moral compass. And that lasted my first year of college until I entered what I would call evangelical Christianity in the context of the Episcopal Church. It's a lot of words to say that I became like very like book smart on the Bible and applied it in a liturgical context. And that's where I stayed for most of my life. And then I had some journeys that moved me out of that. I thought that everything had to be in this specific book and this context. I mean, our prayers are even scripted in the Anglican Communion. Anglican Communion, by the way, for those who don't know, is the second largest church body in the world after the Roman Catholic Church, and mostly in Southeast Asia, Asia, and then Africa is where you can find most of the churches. It's smallest in the United States and North America. But we went from having this highly scripted, everything's a certain way, to now where I sit, where I see a lot more fluidity. I'm more of an oracle card, but I'd like to use your
Right. And Jeanne, what is your history? How did you wind up here?
I retired in 2020 in the middle of the pandemic. My husband and I had plans to retire in Guatemala, which we did. But the month after we got there, he was diagnosed with cancer. About 8 months later, he passed away. In the meantime, I was going to church in Guatemala, and they were reopening their seminary, and I was invited to attend. So after he passed, about a week later, we started classes in seminary, and I very much needed something to do. So it was a lifesaver for me. And I learned a lot by attending seminary in Spanish, and very proud of myself to finish.
And Radleigh, I was going to say how big of a deal that is. I attended in English and barely got through in 3 years. I have no idea how Jeanne did it. It's
Well, I wasn't exactly Hermione, but I did make it through anyway. But I have had when I started thinking about this, I was thinking, why am I attracted to this? Why do I feel the need to do this? And I had to think about I read tarot cards, I talk to angels, I believe in unicorns. Why was I drawn to the liturgy of the church? And I started thinking about the power of words, which I very firmly believe in. And we look at the things like the work of Dr. Masaru Emoto, who did you speak a word to an ice crystal, and what does it look like? They have something where they put sand on metal sheets and play music, and the sand will form geometric patterns. Vibrations have meaning, and I feel very firmly that when we say a prayer, and in the case of the Anglican Church and the Roman Catholic Church, prayers that have been said for millennia, they have power because they've been spoken so often, and they've been spoken in unity, and now in so many languages as well. And I feel like there is power in this intention of speaking prayers jointly. So I am drawn to the liturgy of the Anglican Church and what it means to be part of that history. I can go with you along every mistake that every institutional church has made. And as I studied in seminary, I realized that it didn't even take one generation before people started fighting about what the meaning of Jesus's words meant. And yet it still pulls us, it still draws us.
So I love what you said, because it's like I've long said that I thought that the power of tarot was that it was a well-worn path through a forest. That part of that so many people had put energy into it over the last 600 years, that it became the easiest path for certain people to make their connection to the divine. You said something, and now this is where, so I'm just going to like play with you. So for those of you who are listening, you're listening to the Radleigh Valentine show. We are talking about religion and spirituality. We've got two people who in very many ways sort of started from a spiritual realm, have ended up in a religious realm, carrying both aspects with them in this beautiful mix, which is part of what I'm drawn to. But one of the things that I was actually talking to somebody about the other day was Jesus. And it's like, okay, so how do we know there even was a Jesus? How do we know that that was the case? What do we got? We got a bunch of scrolls that someone dug out of the dirt and then turned into a book. And so now we have a belief system. We also have a belief system of Santa Claus, where a lot of people have bought into that. So, and how do we know that Jesus was quote unquote Son of God? How do we know that? And I'm not saying any of that from a because I'm trying to challenge either one of you. I'm literally saying, how do we explain Jesus? Because even in the spiritual realm, Jesus is considered to be an ascended master. He's on the shelf with Buddha and on the shelf with Kuan Yin and other people that are like that. But how do we know that any of those entities belong on the shelf? Where does the faith come from, and how do we enact it in our hearts? And so I'll just stick Jim with that first.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, to start with, at least the historical Jesus, I think we can agree exists based on not just documents from Josephus looking at that time historically, but just from the witness of people in that first century. And how we know it is he had his 12 apostles, and of the 12, every one of them, if I remember correctly, was martyred except for John. John was put onto an island. He wrote the Revelation what he was boiled in oil, survived, and then exiled to that island. Now, if you go to Patmos now, it's green and lush. At that point, it was pretty rocky and terrible, but he continued to express belief in Jesus. I mean, even Peter crucified in an X, or upside down too, right? And like you look through, or that was, Thomas was X, Peter upside down. All these people went through these terrible tortures and still said that he existed. At any given moment, they could have said he didn't and probably gotten out of it. Rome wasn't a fan of these newer religions at the time, detracted from the state religion, which allowed them to have control. Now, eventually they would turn Christianity into the state religion and an aspect of control. But at that point, I think he had to exist. I just think from the testimony of people at that time, it's too strong. Now, the next question, which is like, how did he become God? And there's a number of books about it, about the writings. Remember, it was an oral tradition. Everyone at that time spoke. They didn't really write things down. In fact, illiteracy was kind of a big thing. I don't know how much language. I know Jeanne's done a lot of language, but with Greek, if you look at the original texts, if you compare like what Peter wrote, who was a fisherman, compared to Paul, who had the equivalent of 2 PhDs and sat on the Sanhedrin, it's very different. It might look fine in English, but when you look at it, it's written by clearly a fisherman who wrote this versus a PhD. So you can see that their personalities come out in these things, and those writings are what we use as the basis. Now, Jeanne, do you want to jump in for a minute and see what I've missed, fill in some holes?
I love the way you've got this just right on the tip of your tongue. What I would say is that in every generation, the institutional church has a danger of crumbling and falling away and just non-existence. But in every generation, there are people that are drawn to it. Why is that?
Why is that? Why do you think
when I looked at the history of the church and saw how every time the church built another layer of hierarchy, you would get an opposing force like St. Francis of Assisi, who said, simplicity, go back to the beginning. What were the first Christians like? So every time we've had a swing in one direction, we've seen a swing in another, but always continuing to draw into Christianity. Why is that?
So why do you think it is?
Jeanne, jump on. I'm just going to jump on Radleigh because I think Jeanne hit a great point. It's like we see Jesus sometimes as this person on like the stained glass or like formal, or he's Nordic with blonde hair walking down the ocean. Like, like those. And look, like there was something that attracted him to it. There's a show right now. It's been out now for a couple of years called The Chosen on Netflix, and I think it does one of the best jobs of showing him as a Middle Eastern male that was just someone who loved people around him and challenged them to grow. One of the things that he did then, and I think he does now, in his context, he walked up to some folks and he said, come follow me. Well, that term was used by rabbis of the time. And what they would say is let me give you some context. At that point, every Jewish male would memorize the first 5 books of the Bible. Everyone. They'd memorize them all. And those who are good enough, those who made the cut, would memorize the entire Old Testament, Hebrew scriptures. Those were the good, right? But the best of the best would apply to a rabbi. And they would go to the rabbi and they go, I want to follow in your dust. I want to be like you. And if the rabbi said, hey, this kid's got it, he can be like me, it was super selective, he would say, hey, come follow me. And it's a huge statement at that time saying, I think you're good enough. That's what that says. It doesn't say, be a religious person or whatever. It goes, I know you can do this. And I think what Jesus does now and what he did in that context, those guys he called, his initial disciples and followers, were the not good enoughs. They were fishing. They weren't studying. So he goes to the people who aren't good enough and says, hey, you know what? I think you're good enough. I think you can do this. And we don't hear that message a lot. Like we don't. Like we get beat down by society all the time. Like no matter what, your job, your spouse, people who we're in a relationship with will always say you can't make a cut at some point. The scale does it to me every day, whatever it is. But Jesus is the one person that says, I love you and you can do this. And I think that's why he's so attractive.
So, Jeanne, you walked right into seminary with your angels and your tarot cards. I mean, what did that look like? I mean, did that trouble anyone? Did they care? What did they think about it?
It is interesting. Nobody cared, and neither did I. And when someone did ask me, do you have any trouble reconciling the two? I said, no, I don't.
And why don't you? If someone came to you today and said, reconcile these two things to me, what would you say to them?
The Holy Spirit speaks in many languages and in many manners, and we can hear the Spirit best in one direction or another direction or in a certain form. But the Holy Spirit keeps trying. The Spirit keeps trying to reach us. And I think of this as I call God the holy divine love.
Yeah, that's cool.
I've also called God the source of love. And the source of love, the Spirit is the way this manifests. And what do we say about the angels? The angels are the breaths of God. They're the ones trying to speak to us, trying to reach us.
Yeah, I like that too.
The angels make the source approachable, and so does Jesus.
Why do you think that in the past, present too, really, that religion in many times wants to control the story so deeply, wants to say Tarot's bad, or the only angels that are legit are Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel. The rest are not.
Because we are so human. We are so human. And anymore, when I envision the face of God, I picture a wise woman who kind of rolls her eyes and shakes her head and says, "Oh, human, human, I love you so much." But we can only understand it in the context of what we know already. So sometimes I think we receive messages that we don't understand because we have no context for it. We have no context for unconditional love.
Right. Oh, 100%. I agree with that. Yeah, I do. And I do think that what we do is to completely put God in a box. I do think we do that. We want to put God in the human box. We want God to act human. We want God to behave human. We think that if we feel a certain way, we don't. It's funny though, because when you said that, it's about us being so human. What I first thought of was, I have a puppy. I have an 8-month-old puppy. His name is Xander. And it's like, it was literally me 20 minutes ago was, Xander, you were just outside. Why did you poop in my office? And it's like, it's like, is that what God is doing? It's like, God's like, you were just outside. Why? I love you so much. And that's what made me think of Xander. It's like, oh my God, I love you so much, but why? It's like, but why? But I do think we want to humanize God, but it's so hard for me because I think I see it in American society, if not worldwide society, this growing divide of extremes, of no, it's this way, no, it's that way, and there's just no space in the middle. And I don't know where that's coming from, except that people are scared. I don't know.
And we want certainty. We want to be right.
Yeah. Well, yes, we want to be right.
And if we're right, everyone else has to be wrong. And I think that's where a lot of it comes from. To just jump on with Jeanne too, is I think if we can't control the entire narrative from whatever our perspective is, then we eliminate the opposition. In reality, we need to have dialogue. to find the truth, which is usually in the middle. Things are rarely white or black. They're that gray in the center.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, Jim, you are creating a church.
Yes. So we're working on something called Avalon Chapel. Now, the nonprofit status of it is taking a break. We tried our first year, and like many church plants, things we swing and miss, and we swung and we spent over a year, and we would say we're not successful in our first approach. So we're taking a step back, and in the next few months trying to determine what it looks like. We still want to have community for people who have what I'll call from the island of misfit toys, to use the holiday season that we just ended a few months. That people don't fit in a place where you can fit. So you're someone who reads the Bible, but also Wayne Dyer, and you apply it in your life. You read tarot, and use the Book of Common Prayer to pray, like something like that, that finds support. Because my belief is community is what helps us in the difficult times, and we can get that online. Like, I think the online communities are great, but when you have a challenge, like you're in the hospital, or someone or a pastor or a pet passes, to have someone that can come give you a hug or spend time with you in a hospital, that's what I'm trying to create. And so again, the first approach was wildly not successful, but that's okay because we learned a lot. And so we're trying to figure out what that's going to look like in the next year moving forward.
Do you have thoughts? Or do you not want to hint?
Oh, no, well, right now we're definitely going to aim to have that in-person come together and just meet, generally a book study. We had tried the approach. And I'm just going to go on a tangent. You can edit this out, I guess, after. But our approach was to use the standard approach of everything online, YouTube, podcasting. We were a 501(c)(3), all of the things you're supposed to do. And it just didn't work. Like, we could not get people there. We used websites to advertise. And so we're going to do the opposite. And sometimes doing the opposite of anything helps you achieve great success. So in other words, do what no one else is doing. In this case, we're going offline. We're just going to do everything in paper, in-person advertisements, and just see how it goes. Now, that seems counterintuitive in our world, which relies on online media and everything, but we're like, what the heck, right? Like, the other way didn't work, so we'll see how this goes. It'll be cheaper. So that's what we're going to do. So we'll be at a lot of festivals this year, at a number of, trying to have a regular meetup, which we're still working on location. We had rented one, but now we're going to just move to, again, using people's homes or local restaurants or things like that.
Cool. Awesome. Cool. So how much are you, so both of you, so like Jeanne, it's like, I know you're working with your angels all the time, and I'm pretty sure Jim is too, but how much do you pull out cards? I mean, it's like, Jeanne, are you pulling out cards on a regular basis? And are there other aspects of spirituality that are adjacent to the Anglican Church that you're still using on a regular basis that maybe have become more poignant to you after having spent all this time in seminary?
I don't use card decks every day, but I am an obsessive collector of cards. So I have quite a few cards. And when I use my cards, I enjoy them and love them, and the messages that I receive. I do talk to my angels every day. I've got guardian angels and my favorite archangels. But I also have my prayer life. I was drawn to the rosary, non-Catholic. I was pulled to pray the rosary every day, and I do that, and then have my my Anglican liturgy that I do.
Well, okay, so tell me, so not Catholic, okay, raised Methodist, so I don't know nothing about no rosaries. So why does that stick for you? What is it about the rosary?
It was Mother Mary. I was drawn to Mother Mary. She told me to pray the rosary, and I do. And Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene are my two go-to saints.
What do you get out of it, though? How does it make you feel a certain way? Does it ground you?
Feeds me.
Does
It
it?
feeds me.
Interesting. Okay.
So to throw something in there, because I think working with saints is so important, and
Uh-huh.
the way we see it is there's two churches, even though there's one, and under different denominations. There's what's called the church militant, which that sounds like a bad term in this world, but it's just the church on earth. And is the church victorious in heaven. And so when we work with these saints, they don't just work with us, they also pray on our behalf. So like we can't pray 24 hours a day. It's just impossible. So when we work with Mary, or whether it's Joseph or Patrick is someone who I work with, they'll, just from my background, Irish thing, they will pray on your behalf throughout the day. And especially Irish, we need extra prayer. So but that's something to think of, because in our tradition, it's like, working with angels, even they're praying for you when you're not. So I work with Ariel every morning, just in my intercessions, and I feel a presence, but throughout the day, even if I'm not in a spiritual mindset, I know that they're praying for me in those difficult periods.
Oh, cool. So now I'm really curious. So it's like, it would totally not be weird at all for me to like grab my cards and go, what do my guardian angels have to say about this today? What does Archangel Michael have to say about this today?
Why don't you, Radleigh?
Oh, I do. It's totally normal for me to do that. Yes, yes.
Pull us some cards.
Oh, well, maybe we will. But here's a question. Have you ever pulled cards and said, what would John say? What would Mark say? What would Matthew say? What would Abraham say? What would any saint say? Have you ever used the cards to get messages from the saints?
I have not.
And
But
either
it's interesting that you say that, Radleigh,
You
because it would be very interesting to have a card deck of saints.
Well, and they're on the traditional Rider-Smith-Waite deck, or Rider-Waite-Smith, depending on how you want to call it, the RWS. If you look at the world card, in the world card, all four of the symbols in the corners represent the traditional biblical authors of the four Gospels. So you can see throughout in fact, there's some interesting symbology in that deck as well, which just comes from Scripture directly.
Yeah. I just wondered if anybody had said, I wonder what
Good
Peter
idea,
would
though.
do.
Like
Let's
that.
ask him. Let's find out. Okay. So you still have a couple of hoops to jump through, Jeanne, as you said. Then what? Then what are you going to do?
I'll be ordained as a priest. I will serve the church as a priest. And I don't know what that will look like, but I'm here. I'm taking the steps necessary.
So I'm also, I wanted to ask this at the beginning of the hour, but we ran off. It's like, why Guatemala? Why did you and your husband want to go there? What drew you there?
I lived in Guatemala in 1976 to 82 after an earthquake. I worked for a church organization at that time. And I have never felt at home anywhere else.
Oh,
So when we left in 82, we went to Austin, Texas and lived there. I was there 35 years. I never felt like I was from Texas. And when it came time to retire, this drew me and it drew my husband and we came here. There.
That's sweet. I love that.
Yeah.
That's so cool. Yes, Jeanne says there because she's visiting
I'm
her
visiting family right now, which is why this is a screensaver.
That's right. That's right. So, what else do you guys want people to know about blending religion and spirituality? What else should they
What
know?
occurs to me, Jim's going to appreciate this. When we do the Holy Communion, our prayers say, joining our voices with the angels and the archangels and with all the company of heaven. We have so many places in our liturgy where the angels are drawn in, and I never noticed it before until I went to seminary and I was also practicing with, speaking to my angels, all of a sudden I saw all the places in our liturgy where we acknowledge the voices of the angels.
Well, and
So
say there
go
to
ahead.
add is that these are vehicles of connection to the divine. So the liturgy, which is what you show up, the prayers that are said. There's a book called the Book of Common Prayer, which if you don't have one, I highly recommend this book. That is really good. I've got the US version. It's all over almost every country. Mine's a little beat up over time. Just all one. But they're this almost the same prayers in every country worldwide. So you can get these from, in Kenya and New Zealand, like each country has their own. And when we go in to do these prayers, it connects us to God. And when you pull up cardboard, like which they're beautiful cardboard pieces of art, right? Our tarot decks, and I have too many of them, but they're designed to help you connect to the divine. And so what I'd want people to know is however you're connecting to the divine, whether that's reading a Bible, doing tarot cards, that you use it as that vehicle, that you don't just rely on what you have as the tool becoming sacred, but it's just a tool, just like a tool to install something in your garage or whatever, to connect you to God and to spirit. So how are you using it? Is it helping you or hindering you to get to that connection?
Cool. Great. So you both bring up a point. It's like one of the things that I've heard in the past is that one of the common denominators across the different religions and different belief systems is angels, that they seem to be like in nearly all of them, even if they're called something else. This whole concept that God sends helpers is something that's like sort of like across the board. And I think what you were saying is that there are certain prayers that seem to be kind of across the board in spiritual thought. What else do you notice that's across the board? What else? What are other common denominators? Anything come to mind?
Great question. I mean, there's a lot. That's a huge question. I'd say, I think everybody has a desire to, every religion has a desire to connect to God or spirit in some way, shape, or form, and to help change our lives to make us the best possible connection, have that best possible connection to the divine. Whether you're doing yoga or you're attending mosque or church, like that's really, in my opinion, where it's going. Jeanne, you can jump in after, because I know I did not think this through. This is probably a PhD thesis level thought process here. I think ultimately that's what everybody's trying to do, is to make you the right connection mechanism to God, to get you prepared to connect to spirit that way. But Jeanne, you want to jump in and save me there?
You said it very well. You said it very well.
Okay.
And I might write a book about that. You never know.
Oh, you might, and get a certification and a degree. One of the things that Jim talks about is that he collects certifications and degrees, like, what do you call it?
Like Pokemon. Yeah, it's
like
like
Pokemon, right?
I've been in school pretty much. My kids have asked me, like, are you ever going to stop going to school? I'm in my 40s. Like, I don't know if that's happened. I don't know if I've had a year where I haven't been in an academic program in a long time. And so I've realized I probably need to take a break from, giving all of my.
See, I'm just excited that I'm going to take a class on Midjourney AI. That's my big degree that I'm getting in 2024, is to be able to make angel pictures.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So you've been listening to the Radleigh Valentine Show. We've been talking about where religion and spirituality blend. We've been talking to Jim Bridgham and Jeanne Mitchell, who are both, Jim is an ordained minister. Jeanne is 5 seconds away she's finished with seminary, and she has to jump through a hoop or two, but she's going to be there any minute now. So guys, tell them where people can find you. Tell them what you're working on or what you want people to know. Jim?
So for me, the best way to get me is actually my email address right now. We're trying to figure out what to do moving forward with Avalon. Avalon Chapel is going to be based in Elizabeth, Colorado. We'll continue in that way with meetings at least. But you can reach me either at theninjapadre.com, or excuse me, theninjapadre@gmail.com. That was my call sign in the Air Force over time, and long story. Or greenpriest.org is where we'll be as well. And so you can reach me there. And again, we'd love to connect with you in person at Avalon Chapel.
Okay, cool. And Jeanne, what about you?
There is no way to reach me. I don't have a website. I don't have a YouTube channel. But when you post this podcast, I'll put something on the Facebook Radleigh membership
Okay.
group
All right.
and get a discussion going.
Okay, cool. All right, guys, thanks so much. You're listening to Radleigh Valentine Show. We are doing a special called The Next Wave. Tune in next week for more people that you really should be noticing, you really should be listening from. I'm Radleigh Valentine. Always remember, life is magic.